Hey, everybody, real quick, if you need a season 1 recap of Sweet Tooth, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner. It'll take you right to it. Now, season 2 picks up right where season 1 left off. Birdie had actually just gotten back from looking for something in Antarctica, something that she'd been looking for a long time. It was the location of an old ship from about probably the 1800s. She knew where the ship would be, but she couldn't find it until she actually collapsed through the ice, and that's where she came across the HMS Simpson. She knew she was on the right track because even though this whole ship was covered in ice and frozen for many years, there were still purple flowers intact. When she fell below deck, she saw the captain dead, but what was growing out of him was a giant purple flower. But there were a bunch of little purple flowers surrounding him, and they were still growing, still alive. She ended up taking his journal, and his name was Dr. James Thacker. He starts flipping through some of the pages, and this guy drew a tiny moose. He then drew what looks like a giant cave with somebody walking into it. But then Birdie hears something, and her cord from above rips her up to the surface. She was kind of getting her bearings set. She got a little concerned because there were hoof prints in the snow that weren't there before. So she knew that she wasn't alone. But when she got back to her command center, that's when she got the radio call from Bear. She had the initial questions that anyone would have. Who are you? Bear introduces herself as Becky. But then she says, wait, are you who I think you are? And when Birdie says, well, that depends. How exactly did you get in my attic? Where's Judy? Bear Becky says, oh my God, it is you. And by the way, Judy's fine. She quickly explains that she's with Gus, but not actually physically with him. She goes on to tell Birdie all about Jep and Gus, and that how when Gus found out that Birdie wasn't his actual mother, he ran off. As Becky's explaining all of this, Birdie hears a click on the line, and she says, wait, I would start hiding if I were you. When you activated that phone, there was a tracking beacon on it. And I don't know who's coming after you, but somebody definitely will. Birdie, though, then gets the conversation back to Gus, asking Becky, how much does he know? And Becky tells her a lot. She then asks Becky, what's he like? And Becky says, you should see him. He turned into a great kid. Birdie asks Becky, well, did he find my tape? And Becky has no idea what Birdie's talking about. And Birdie explains that she hid a cassette tape in the attic for Gus. Becky hangs up the phone and goes into the attic, and along with Judy, they start searching for this cassette tape. It takes a little bit because Becky doesn't even know what a cassette tape looks like, but she ends up finding it anyway. But as soon as she finds it, the last men show up because they were the ones that were tracking the phone. Becky and Judy know that they need to get out of there, but Judy especially knows that Becky needs to escape. So she sacrifices herself. She locks Becky in the attic and tells her, get out of here. You have your whole life ahead of you. I'll take care of these guys. And to her credit, Judy tries. She sets up a flamethrower and she does a pretty good job, but eventually they end up killing her. Meanwhile, Becky tried to escape through the attic, going on the roof, but she was caught by one of the last men. Although she's able to evade him and actually drag him out of the window. But in doing so, she dropped the satellite phone, and when she went to go after it, she too fell off the roof, and when she lands on the ground, she notices that the satellite phone is broken. Now all she can do is try to get that tape to Gus. Now, Gus is at the preserve, and he's doing okay. I mean, by all accounts, it's a scary situation, but he's relieved to be amongst his own people, especially Wendy. She's very welcoming. As Wendy is talking to Gus, a girl named Jojo Raccoon comes by and starts signing with him. And Wendy explains to Gus that sign language is how they communicate with those that can't speak. But Jojo wants to know who taught Gus to speak, and he says, my pubba. And Wendy asks, well, then who's the big man? Sorry, but you talk a lot in your sleep. That's probably because Gus has had nightmares regarding Jep getting shot. Gus explains that the big man wasn't his dad, he was just a really, really good guy. But he doesn't know what happened to him, and he doesn't want to talk about it. Wendy, though, realizes that she failed to make introductions. So she stands up and introduces everybody to Gus, and then one by one goes through the hybrids that are there. First is Bobby, who explains that he's been digging all day, but unfortunately, he can't dig his way out of the preserve. The concrete's too deep. There's an owl hybrid named Junior who likes to keep watch from the rafters. Haley is a chicken hybrid who curses a lot and also mimics voices pretty well. There's Anna and Hannah, the two rabbit hybrids. They do everything together and their hearing is incredible. Earl is the elephant hybrid. He talks, thanks to a bunch of ladies who looked after him. There's also Maya, the lemur hybrid, and she likes to just kind of hang from the light fixtures. Otto is the porcupine hybrid. He leaves quills everywhere. Max is the skunk hybrid who can funk up a room. They also have a new addition, but they don't even get to names with this one. As Wendy explains, he's had it a little rough, and while he can talk, he immediately cuts her off and says, "Only when I want to." And he clearly doesn't want to talk right now. The last hybrid is a turtle named Teddy, who is really, really shy, and overall seems kind of sad. Before he was rescued, he was locked in a basement, and he has a big, big fear of the dark. There is one other hybrid from the group, but that's Roy. And these kids don't know that Roy was the one that was replaced with Gus, and Roy isn't coming back. And thanks to Roy's sacrifice, if you want to call it that, it's keeping Ronnie alive, who actually, just like Gus, is having some nightmares. But Dr. Singh is doing his best to save his wife for the time being. He wants to stay with Ronnie, but Abbott's men don't even allow it. He's frustrated, he's worn down, and he's dealing with an absolute jerk of a boss. Abbott doesn't care that Ronnie's struggling. All he wants is a cure. Singh tells Abbott that he's absolutely exhausted. He needs a break. But Abbott says, "Oh, you're not getting a break. No, this new strain, it's coming for us. It already wiped out a lot of Albuquerque. And it doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about your wife. So how about this? Your wife doesn't get another dose of this stuff until I get results. Now, I'm going on a very important trip, and when I come back, I expect something." Singh tries to explain that a cure was going to take weeks, months, but Abbott yells at him that they'll be dead in weeks. He then leaves for this trip, and he leaves Johnny in charge. And the trip is with a bunch of other commanders who are around the country. While Abbott's in charge of his area, there are other reps who are in charge of theirs. But there's only one in attendance. And Abbott gets really pissed off about this, because there were supposed to be a lot in attendance. His name is Dutch, and he came on horseback with a group, and he doesn't care too much for Abbott. Abbott goes back and forth with this guy about why it's important that these reps should have been there, that while they don't like each other, they need to work together on this matter. Finally, Dutch gets tired of Abbott and walks up to him and says, "Look, go home. The reality is we will never accept you." And then he turns around and goes back to wherever he came from. Now, back at the preserve, the hybrids are getting acquainted with Gus. They ask him how he got there, and he tells them about the flyers. But he's now realizing that he doesn't know exactly what he was looking for. He thinks in the end he just didn't want to be alone. But the story of Gus radioing the preserve gets the kids thinking that they can use the radio to reach out to Amy. The thing is, it's not going to be easy to get the radio. They're locked inside of the stables. Luckily, though, they have Bobby, who can burrow underneath. And he covertly makes his way through the preserve, getting the keys that will open the stable up, and he returns. The kids then open the doors, and it's up to Gus and Wendy to get to the radio and not get caught. And Wendy's feeling nervous, but Gus makes her feel better by saying, "Hey, I'm here with you too." They have to tiptoe through the preserve, but eventually they do make it to the radio. Wendy jumps on and tells, hopefully, Amy, that they're alive, they're under the elephant pen, and Roy was taken. But she can't say any more because one of the guards comes back and the two kids have to hide. And that's when Gus notices that the body of Roy is floating in the tank behind them. So now Wendy and Gus know what happened to Roy, the hybrid chameleon. They are, however, caught by Johnny and returned to the stables. He takes back the keys. He puts a collar on Bobby so he can't burrow out anymore. And he locks the kids back up. And Wendy tells the group that she wasn't able to get in touch with Amy, but she's pretty confident that if she heard it, she will come. She then gets ready to tell the kids about the unfortunate news that they have regarding Roy. But Gus cuts her off and says, "Yeah, he escaped." That lie doesn't sit well with Wendy. Later that night, when she gets Gus alone, she explains that their mom never lied to him, and she didn't like the fact that he lied to these hybrids. She didn't think it was right. But Gus makes the point that telling the kids what happened to Roy isn't going to make them feel any better. You might as well kind of give them some hope, because they don't need to be scared any more than they already are. Now for the hybrids, it's a matter of just waiting to see if their mission was a success. But Wendy isn't feeling too successful. She feels like she failed because they got caught. She's also dealing with the stress of having to look after the rest of the hybrids. Gus, making her feel better, reminds her that all of them, together, are getting out of there. The door then suddenly opens, and Johnny instructs his men to grab Gus and bring him to Dr. Singh. For Wendy, she knows what this probably means for Gus, and Gus knows what it probably means for Gus. But they sit him in the chair, and Singh walks in and says, "I know you can talk." But Gus doesn't say a word. So Singh tells him a minute has already passed by, and in a few more, 4 large men will come to that door, and they're going to take you to that cold metal table, and the man with the red glasses will make me cut you open. Also, I can look inside you for answers. Unless you can start answering my questions. Gus finally speaks and says, "Is that what happened to Roy?" Singh kind of ignores that question for the time being and says, "What's your name and how old are you?" And Gus says, "Gus," and also says, "I'm 10. Singh doesn't really believe that. Gus gets the questioning back to what happened with Roy, and Singh tries to kind of explain that Roy helped out somebody he loved, but he gets really frustrated and looks at Gus and says, "I'm not a bad man. Roy couldn't answer my questions, and that's why that happened to him. But you can answer my questions. So tell me, was your father a doctor?" And Gus yells at him, "I don't have any parents. Can I go now?" Singh yells at him, "I'm going to ask you one last time. How old are you?" But Gus once again says, "I'm 10. And Singh doesn't believe him because the virus started 9 years ago. But then he looks down and notices that Gus doesn't have a belly button. He then starts realizing that maybe Gus is right and he actually doesn't have any parents. He asks Gus if he can speak with the man who taught him to talk. And Gus tells Singh that Pubba is dead. But he also lets Singh know that he saw Pubba when he was surrounded by those purple flowers. He doesn't exactly know how, but he knows that he talked to him. Singh asks Gus if he could possibly find him again if he was in the purple flowers. Gus, though, gets scared when some of Abbott's men start banging on the window. He explains to Gus that he doesn't want what's inside of him. He wants what's in his mind. And he asks Gus, "Can I count on you?" And Gus says, "Yeah, if you promise that you won't hurt any more of us." And Singh promises, as long as Gus helps him. To Wendy's utter shock, Gus returns a short while later to the rest of the hybrids. And he came bearing gifts. He was able to get Singh to give him a light, which he uses for a nightlight for Teddy, who really appreciates it. Right after Gus shows up, it's dinner time, and they've been feeding the kids kibble because they think they're animals, and the kids don't want to eat it, but it's the only thing available. But inside the kibble is something different this time. It's dog. And Gus can't figure out exactly how it got in there, but then he realizes it must be Jep. And Wendy can smell Amy on dog. So they know that Jep and Amy are together, and they're coming to rescue them. Meanwhile, Singh had gone to visit his wife, albeit from outside, and as he's staring at her, he notices that a purple flower is growing in the corner of a window inside the room that Ronnie's in. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.